Hello. The weather has been gradually drying up over the past 24 hours or so, and we've got some more dry, settled weather on the cards through much of the week ahead, really. High pressure is going to be in charge over the next few days, but for the rest of the week, we will at times see weather fronts just trying to topple across the north of that high pressure. Could bring a little bit of rain at times across parts of Scotland in particular, perhaps the north of Northern Ireland, but it'll be warming up here. Mostly dry elsewhere, though, with some spells of sunshine on the cards. So we are in for a relatively quiet few days of weather. We're likely to start Wednesday morning with quite a bit of mist and fog around, especially so for parts of eastern England, also perhaps Wales and the southwest of England. Could be some misty patches elsewhere. For most, they'll tend to lift and clear, so it'll brighten up. Some sunny spells, particularly for England and Wales. Just the odd isolated shower. More rain moving into the northwest of Scotland later on in the afternoon. So temperatures in the northwest under the cloud, only about 13 there for Stornoway, but up to around about 21 for the likes of Birmingham and London too. So there's that wet weather through Wednesday evening. Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland seeing some outbreaks of rain. Further south, most places staying dry, but there should be some mist and some fog that's going to be forming again into the early hours of Thursday morning. But certainly mild, many places staying in double figures overnight. So more of the same on Thursday. High pressure still in charge, so a lot of dry weather, mist clearing away gradually. Lots of sunshine, I think, for England and Wales by this stage. It just could be the odd isolated shower. Again, a little bit more cloud across the north of Scotland. Temperatures in Lerwick only around 11 degrees, but for the bulk of the UK, we're looking at around about 18 to 22 degrees. And that warming trend will continue as we head into Friday too. So high pressure still very much in charge. I think by Friday we'll have less in the way of rain and cloud across the north of Scotland and quite widely across the UK in those spells of sunshine. Temperatures will be above 20 degrees. We could see 23 or even 24 down towards the southeast. Again, a little bit cooler, especially across the north of Scotland and the Northern Isles in particular. Now, heading into the weekend, it looks like high pressure will be sitting out towards the east there. This weather front will just try and nudge in from the west by the time we get to Sunday. But Saturday certainly looking dry, fine, pretty warm for all of us. Just that chance of a few showers moving into the west as we head through Sunday. Bye for now.
I just felt this tightening in my stomach. Where do I need to go? How can I get there?
Rescuers are using their bare hands to search desperately for survivors.
In a lot of the stories that we tell, they can be so bleak. People here wonder if they can ever rebuild. You need to show some hope.
So this is what an exodus looks like. My coping mechanism at the time was to not think further than an hour ahead.
My job is investigating bad stuff that's on social media. I know by doing this interview and sharing it, I'll probably get more online abuse. My job is to expose how people are targeted because I'm a reporter who can do that.
At the end of the day, a proclamation of a new king is actually the moment to be looking forward. And that tempered the way that I covered the story.
Everyone ready for that proclamation of a new king. Hip, hip!
Behind the Stories. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Live from Washington, this is BBC News. Major splits between Israel and Hamas slow momentum for a possible ceasefire as aid groups describe a horrific humanitarian scene in Gaza. Adult film star Stormy Daniels testifies in Donald Trump's New York hush money trial. And South African emergency services are racing to rescue dozens of people a day after an apartment building collapsed. Hello, I'm Catriona Perry. You're very welcome. The United Nations says Israel is not allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza through the Rafah crossing after Israeli forces took control of the Gaza side on the border with Egypt. Hamas has warned that the Israeli incursion there aims to undermine efforts to secure a ceasefire. On Monday night, Hamas announced it had accepted proposals drawn up by international mediators, but the deal was rejected by Israel as inadequate. Paul Adams reports from Jerusalem.
A deal may now be tantalisingly close, But in Rafah, Israel's military pressure is relentless. Today, severing Gaza's last link with the outside world, the crossing point into Egypt. And raising their flag, sending an unmistakable message to Hamas. The noose is tightening. The sounds of approaching war echo among the displaced. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in the sand against the Egyptian border or next to the sea. I don't know where to stay, Ahmed says. People are fleeing from Rafah, and I have my children with me. Gazans have been on the move since yesterday morning, heeding Israel's latest warnings, not knowing if the coming days will bring relief or despair.
After what we've witnessed, they've said multiple times that there will be a ceasefire, but we're frustrated and we have no hope. There's no big hope, only a small one.
For aid agencies already struggling to cope, the prospect of a full-scale Israeli operation in Rafah is alarming.
As the operation will progress, we will lose progressively more areas to the fighting. And I'm afraid that this will also affect our warehouses, health facilities, hospitals, and the very, very few sites where we have the ability to give medical support.
For the families of Israeli hostages, these are also moments of acute anxiety. John and Rachel's son Hirsch was abducted and badly injured on October the 7th. No sign of life until this Hamas video 2 weeks ago. His parents now just daring to hope.
When we heard the news that maybe there's a deal, we were cautiously optimistic, and we remain cautiously optimistic.
It's scary to have military actions going on. They're innocent civilians, including our son. We just need this to come to an end, and we need the mediators on all sides and the two main parties to just sit in the room and hammer this out and don't come out of the room without a deal.
Away from the quiet dignity of the hostage families, friends and supporters are determined to make as much noise as possible, demanding the government do more to rescue Hirsch and all the others.
These Israelis protesting in the heart of Jerusalem tonight feel that a deal to end this terrible war has never been closer. And so as they protest close to the Prime Minister's official residence, their demands are becoming more and more urgent.
Israel's defense minister says the Rafah operation won't stop until Hamas is eliminated or the hostages start to return. Talks are continuing, a successful outcome still far from guaranteed.
Well, as you heard there, Israel's closure of 2 crossings into southern Gaza is alarming the humanitarian community. For more, I spoke to Save the Children's Gaza director, Rachel Cummings. She left Rafah this morning and is now in the central Gaza town of Deir el-Balah.
The situation in Rafah is unbelievable. It's extraordinary what is happening to the people in Rafah, remembering that they have been displaced already many, many times. Yesterday, evacuation orders were issued by the Israelis to the population in Rafah, enforcing the movement of children and their families. And last night, the bombardments in Rafah were extraordinary, something that we haven't experienced before, the intensity and the proximity of the bombs dropping. And we could hear the firing from the tanks as they came into Rafah. This morning, we activated our relocation plan. We had planned for this scenario as Save the Children to try to ensure some degree of safety for our 58 Palestinian colleagues and 12 international staff to allow us to continue operations in Deir el-Balah for the population displaced, and wherever possible to continue programme operations for the people in Rafah, but Of course, that current situation is extraordinarily difficult and extremely dangerous for all people in Rafah.
So as aid workers, you had a plan, a way to get your local staff out. But what is the situation like for those who don't have that option, who remain behind in Rafah now?
Exactly, and the situation is desperate, and some of our own staff have remained. There is very little space for people, and some people just cannot leave Rafah. They have elderly parents, they have children with disabilities, and they were unable to pick up and move. So it's very, very challenging. And as we were drying out this morning, we saw trucks, we saw donkeys, we saw people just carrying what they could on the road, trying to move out of the zones that had been issued with evacuation orders. But again, there is nowhere safe in Gaza for people to move to. So these choices that people are facing, they're impossible choices.
Israel says it has a humanitarian zone in the area where you are. Did you see that? What does it look like?
No, I have not seen that. And again, there is nowhere safe in Gaza for children and their family. But people being displaced into Deir al-Balah and Al-Mawasi and Khan Yunis, these areas are not adequately supplied to support people in terms of essential life-saving services like clean water, like adequate sanitation, like food and healthcare services, and of course, any learning and education and protection services for children. We drove through open sewers in Deir al-Balah with children with no shoes walking through the streets, with pregnant women carrying things on their backs without adequate protection. And, there is no humanity in Gaza currently. It's a desperate situation.
Rachel Cummings there, Gaza Country Director with Save the Children International. Here in Washington, US President Joe Biden warned against the increasing threat of anti-Semitism in a speech honouring the 6 million Jews killed by Nazi Germany. In an event at the Capitol hosted by the US Holocaust Memorial Museum, Mr. Biden said the hatred of Jews continued to lie deep in the hearts of too many people around the world. He condemned anti-Semitic elements of pro-Palestinian protests on US college campuses and spoke about the nearly 1,200 people killed and 250 taken hostage by Hamas on October 7th, among them descendants of Holocaust survivors.
Now, here we are, not 75 years later, but just 7.5 months later, and people are already forgetting. They're already forgetting that Hamas unleashed this terror. It was Hamas that brutalized Israelis. It was Hamas who took and continues to hold hostages. I have not forgotten, nor have you, and we will not forget.
132 of those kidnapped on October 7th are still missing, and they remain at the heart of the negotiations between Israel and Hamas. Let's talk about this now with Danny Gilbert, an academic at Northwestern University who specialises in hostage diplomacy. Danny, thanks for joining us on BBC News. Looking at how the details of this deal is being reported, Israel wants 33 hostages in the first stage of the deal. Hamas wants to release them in stages, 3 on the third day, 3 7 days later, and so on. How serious a sticking point are those sorts of considerations when it comes to hostage release talks?
They're fairly significant. So both sides at this moment understand that they're in a conversation about some sort of ceasefire, some sort of hostage release, and some sort of prisoner release as well. But the details of how that happens become major sticking points between the two sides. At the moment, reporting suggests that there are 3 major sticking points between the two sides that intermediaries are trying to work through. And that's how permanent a ceasefire will actually be, how many hostages will be released and when. Also, many of the hostages are actually no longer living. It's about releasing hostages' remains, which came as a surprise to the Israeli government, as well as the Israeli government's ability to decide which Palestinian prisoners they will be able to release from Israeli prisons in exchange for the hostages coming home.
So prolonging the release of hostages in many ways gives Hamas the upper hand. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So in a way, both sides have different sorts of leverage that they are looking at when they think about making this deal. For Hamas, their leverage comes with continuing to hold on to hostages and saying that they will only release a few of them once a week as a ceasefire extends, whereas Israel continues to threaten the invasion of Rafah with 1.5 million Palestinians still living there and under horrible conditions, as we just heard. And so both sides want to hold on to that leverage as much as possible to make sure that they're not taken advantage of with the agreement of a deal.
There has been much domestic criticism in Israel of Prime Minister Netanyahu, who says that getting the hostages back are a priority of his, but the families would say it's taken such a long time. Are his actions matching the sentiment of that urgency that he talks about?
That's a great question, and I think that that's very fair criticism. From where I sit, it's been very clear that throughout the past 7 months, Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that there are two main aims of this war. And the first one was about eliminating Hamas, and the second one was about bringing hostages home. It's very clear from research from past cases that the best way to bring hostages home is to make concessions. And it is in the power of the Israeli government to make concessions to bring those hostages home. And so if I were representing those families in Israel, I would be livid as well.
And Danny, just a final one briefly. Those individuals have been held against their will for 7 months now in very poor conditions. Just how critical is time at this point for them?
Hostage taking is largely about time. We know that many of the hostages have had a very, very difficult time in captivity, and their outcomes are still uncertain. We don't even know how many of the hostages are still alive. Reports are coming out every day about hostages that are injured, that are seriously ill, and the Israeli government is rightly worried that if they allow for a continued delay of the hostage release, that many of those hostages might not make it.
OK. Danny Gilbert, academic at Northwestern University, specialising in hostage diplomacy. Thanks for joining us on BBC News.
Thanks.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Well, let's have a look at some other stories making news now. There have been reports of long delays at airports in the UK due to an outage affecting passport e-gates at the border. A spokesperson for Heathrow Airport said they were aware of an issue with UK border systems across the country. Manchester Airport also confirmed that it had been affected. John Swinney will become Scotland's 7th First Minister after being nominated by Parliament. The SNP leader succeeds Humza Yousaf, who resigned from office earlier today. His appointment will be rubber-stamped by the King before he's officially sworn in at the Court of Session on Wednesday. Mr Swinney was backed by 64 MSPs, guaranteeing him the required majority. Rail passengers face more travel chaos on Wednesday because of continuing strikes by train drivers in a long-running pay dispute. Members of ASLEF will walk out at services running across England and into Wales and Scotland. Services will be crippled for the day, with stations closed and few trains running. Those that do run will start later and finish earlier than usual. The dispute is now the longest ever in the rail industry. You're live with BBC News. Stormy Daniels, the adult film star at the centre of Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial, has taken the stand to testify against the former US president in a New York courtroom. In her testimony, Ms. Daniels discussed the $130,000 payment Mr. Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, made to her. Prosecutors say that payment, made just before the 2016 election, was used to conceal a 2006 sexual encounter between Ms. Daniels and the former president. Mr. Trump, the first president to be put on criminal trial in the US, is accused of falsifying business records to cover up that so-called hush money payment. He denies those allegations and denies having any sexual encounter with Ms. Daniels. Mr. Trump's defence argued that some of the details Ms. Daniels discussed were irrelevant to the case, and they asked for a mistrial, which the judge ruled against. Donald Trump says the trial has hampered his 2024 presidential campaign.
It's a disgrace. In the meantime, I'm stuck. I'm here. Instead of being in Georgia, instead of being in New Hampshire, instead of being in Wisconsin, and all the different states that we wanted to be in. We're not able to be there because we're stuck in this trial, which everyone knows is a hoax. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's go live now to Shayna Jacobs, federal courts and law enforcement reporter for The Washington Post, who's been covering this trial. Shayna, thanks for being with us on BBC News. How would you characterise today's proceedings? Is this the most dramatic day to date?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it's been the most dramatic day. The testimony was certainly the most dramatic we've heard so far. This is sort of the core of the prosecution's case against Donald Trump because it speaks to the underlying allegations, the affair that he was allegedly trying to cover up by falsifying records that were kept at his company, his personal company, and records that were compiled in 2016 as he was running for his first term. So this is, while much of this information has been out there, while much of what Stormy Daniels had to say has been publicly known, this is also helping the DA build the structure of its case against Trump.
Stormy Daniels took to the stand and gave plenty of details, graphic details at times. And as you say, much of it was in the public domain already. But what new information did we learn today?
So there were some, it was all new to the jury, which I think is the key point here. The jury heard in relatively specific detail how the sexual encounter between the two of them transpired. And what her reaction was to that encounter. She sort of described herself without saying she was a sexual assault victim. She used language that is frequently used by sexual assault accusers. So it sort of mirrored testimony that you would see in that kind of case, but she was unequivocal that she did not think she was a victim. That said, her testimony really does set up the broader scheme for a broader scheme against Donald Trump to by showing the jury that that something transpired that the president would find damaging to his campaign in 2016. So to the extent that the jury finds her credible for that, for her story about the encounter, they may see this as proof that Donald Trump had something he wanted to cover up and would have tried to cover up.
Now, Donald Trump at times appeared to be quite unhappy with the evidence she was giving. His legal team objected multiple times, and the judge, in fact, objecting as well on their behalf and not happy at times with Donald Trump's commentary. Tell us about those interactions.
So, right, they did object throughout the DA's testimony. And like I was just saying, it was extensive, the detail about what happened and the detail about what she was feeling at the time and what her reaction was. I mean, she described that her hands were so shaky that she couldn't get dressed, or she was having trouble getting dressed. So she's creating this scenario that paints the former president as a sexual abuser. So while she's saying it's consensual, she's painting him as an abuser. And according to his team, that is just too prejudicial. For her to be able to say these things and say it the way she said it, she's creating this appearance that she was assaulted when that's not, in fact, what happened, and that's not what she's even alleging underneath it all. So the defense has said the prosecution went way too far and that they were allowed to go way too far. There was a limiting instruction earlier before she even took the stand where Judge Merchan basically said to the prosecution, you can let her discuss, she can tell us about the event, but she can't get into very specific detail. Okay. And what the defense said this afternoon was, hey, this was totally in violation of, your own order. So therefore, we need a mistrial, and Judge Merchan decided one was not necessary.
Okay. And of course, Stormy Daniels will continue her evidence at that trial on Thursday. Shayna Jacobs, federal courts and law enforcement reporter for The Washington Post. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Separately, Donald Trump's trial in Florida, where he's accused of mishandling classified documents, has been indefinitely postponed. US District Judge Aileen Cannon, who was appointed by the former president, said that setting a trial date before resolving questions over evidence would be imprudent. Mr. Trump is accused of keeping top-secret documents after leaving office. The trial was initially set for May 20th, is now unlikely to begin before the presidential election on November 5th. New details emerged about an American soldier who was arrested in Russia last week while travelling to the country's Far East. The US Army said Staff Sergeant Gordon Black did not receive military clearance for his trip to the Far East from a US garrison in South Korea. It added that he's being held in pre-trial detention on theft charges. Russia's Interior Ministry said a woman who Mr. Black had planned to visit in Russia accused the American of stealing money. The White House repeated its guidance of urging all Americans to leave Russia immediately. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived in Serbia, the second stop on his tour of Europe, the leader's first trip to the continent in 5 years. He was greeted by the Serbian President, Aleksandar Vučić. The two will hold meetings on Wednesday in Belgrade, which has rolled out the red carpet, with the capital city streets decorated with Chinese flags. Serbia is expected to offer a warmer welcome than Xi's first stop, France, where President Emmanuel Macron pressed Beijing not to support Russia's war efforts and to resolve international trade disputes. China has invested heavily in Serbia, and it's also where 25 years ago its embassy was bombed by NATO forces. Our correspondent Guy Deloney explains.
This is the brand new China Cultural Center in Belgrade, but in 1999 it was the site of China's embassy in Serbia's capital, and 25 years ago to the day it was hit by a NATO airstrike, and there's a memorial over there to the 3 people who were killed. Now, NATO has always insisted that targeting the embassy was accidental, but ahead of his visit, President Xi Jinping has made it clear that feelings are still running high over the incident. He wrote an editorial for a Serbian newspaper in which he said that we will never forget. Chinese people cherish peace, but we will never allow such a thing to happen ever again. Now, that's the kind of rhetoric which goes down very well in Serbia, where the majority of people, the vast majority, are strongly opposed to NATO membership. And there are other reasons for people in Serbia to feel good about President Xi Jinping's arrival. China's been an increasingly active investor in Serbia in recent years, involved in everything from infrastructure like roads and railways through to domestic appliances like the Hisense factory. And it's an opportunity for Serbia to say to people in Brussels, with the EU accession process taking an interminably long time, look, we have other options, you know.
South African emergency services are racing to rescue dozens of construction workers who are still trapped after an apartment building collapsed on Monday. At least 7 people are known to have died at the site in the coastal city of George. The cause of the collapse, which happened while the 5-storey building was under construction, is being investigated. Our correspondent, Shingai Nyuka, has more.
It's now more than 24 hours since the 5-storey apartment building, which was a construction site, collapsed on itself, trapping dozens of construction workers beneath the rubble. Authorities say that 75 people were on site when the building collapsed on Monday afternoon. The majority of them are yet to be found. Emergency services are working around the clock. Heavy machinery has been brought in, cranes, excavators, to lift some of the blocks, the fortified concrete that is trapping many of the people beneath the debris. Now, the local authorities say that they have been in contact with some of those that are still trapped underneath the rubble with mobile phones. And so they are hopeful that as this search and rescue operation continues, that they'll find more people alive. Now, while the families and the people here are really focused on trying to do that, the local authorities are concerned. They want to understand exactly what happened. Building collapses are very rare in South Africa, and the country's President Cyril Ramaphosa has said that an investigation must not only bring closure to the families, but also ensure that a disaster like this never happens again.
That's it for the moment. Check out more of the day's news at bbc.com/news. Thanks for watching. Stay with us here on BBC News.
Hello. The weather has been gradually drying up over the past 24 hours or so, and we've got some more dry, settled weather on the cards through much of the week ahead, really. High pressure is going to be in charge over the next few days, but for the rest of the week, we will at times see weather fronts just trying to topple across the north of that high pressure. Could bring a little bit of rain at times across parts of Scotland, in particular, perhaps the north of Northern Ireland, but it'll be warming up here. Mostly dry elsewhere, though, with some spells of sunshine on the cards. So we are in for a relatively quiet few days of weather. We're likely to start Wednesday morning with quite a bit of mist and fog around, especially so for parts of eastern England, also perhaps Wales and the southwest of England. Could be some misty patches elsewhere. For most, they'll tend to lift and clear, so it'll brighten up. Some sunny spells, particularly for England and Wales. Just the odd isolated shower. More rain moving into the northwest of Scotland later on in the afternoon. So temperatures in the northwest under the cloud, only about 13 there for Stornoway, but up to around about 21 for the likes of Birmingham and London too. So there's that wet weather through Wednesday evening. Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland seeing some outbreaks of rain. Further south, most places staying dry, but there should be some mist and some fog that's going to be forming again into the early hours of Thursday morning. But certainly mild, many places staying in double figures overnight. So more of the same on Thursday. High pressure still in charge, so a lot of dry weather, mist clearing away gradually. Lots of sunshine, I think, for England and Wales by this stage. It just could be the odd isolated shower. Again, a little bit more cloud across the north of Scotland. Temperatures in Lerwick only around 11 degrees, but for the bulk of the UK, we're looking at around about 18 to 22 degrees. And that warming trend will continue as we head into Friday too. So high pressure still very much in charge. I think by Friday we'll have less in the way of rain and cloud across the north of Scotland and quite widely across the UK in those spells of sunshine. Temperatures will be above 20 degrees. We could see 23 or even 24 down towards the southeast. Again, a little bit cooler, especially across the north of Scotland and the Northern Isles in particular. Now, heading into the weekend, it looks like high pressure will be setting out towards the east there. This weather front will just try and nudge in from the west by the time we get to Sunday. But Saturday certainly looking dry, fine, pretty warm for all of us. Just that chance of a few showers moving into the west as we head through Sunday. Bye for now.
Ready for a lively debate? Sometimes our panelists agree, and sometimes they don't. There's people with a lot to say, and others who just say enough. Some who want to ask the hard questions, some who want to avoid them, and some who think they have the answers. They're guaranteed to keep you entertained, whether you agree or not. Politics Live, today at 11:15 on BBC Two and iPlayer.
What does it take to become a top opera star like tenor Jonas Kaufmann,
Welsh bass baritone Sabryn Terfel, and Greek-American soprano Maria Callas? I'm on a mission to find out how opera is trying to attract new audiences and reinvent itself.
I think music has the power to change the world.
Take Me to the Opera. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
I want to talk to you about the politics of this. Did she not think she was going to get that question?
It's important to remember that this is a negotiation.
It's a good photo op.
I have an opportunity to create chaos.
There is always an email. We are so insignificant in this cosmos. Do you want some facts on baguettes? I'm just feeding you the stories. Maybe this is The Context.
The Context, weeknights from 8 p.m. on BBC News and iPlayer.
Time for payout. Failed cryptocurrency exchange FTX says it has billions more dollars than it needs to repay customers. Plus, TikTok swipes back. The social media giant files a lawsuit to stop a ban in the United States. Hello and welcome to the first day of our brand new show, Business Today. I'm Steve Lai, coming to you live from Singapore, where it would probably be described as same, but different. And there's no better way to get you familiar with the new look and feel than to get on with the start of our show with our top story. Now, failed cryptocurrency exchange FTX says it has billions of dollars more than it needs to cover what customers lost during its collapse in 2022. How did this come to be, you might ask? And for our answers, let's go to our business reporter, Suranjana Tiwari. She has more for us from the newsroom. Sue, what can you tell us?
Steve, when FTX collapsed in November 2022, around 2 million customers were left with no access to their funds, and they also continued to lose interest on the money they had on the exchange because it stopped trading. Now FTX has filed for bankruptcy, and its founder Sam Bankman-Fried has been convicted of fraud. But during those bankruptcy proceedings, it's been found that the crypto exchange actually has more assets than previously thought. Now it's in the process of selling off a lot of its assets, but part of the reason is because a lot of its assets are in cryptocurrency, and cryptocurrency is valued very highly at the moment and in recent weeks and months it's really gone up. Now experts are saying that it's very rare in bankruptcy cases for customers to get all of their money back. In this case, they might get more than 100% of their money back, but that still will be a long way off because these bankruptcy proceedings will take some time.
Thanks very much, Saranjana, for getting us up to speed with those developments. Saranjana Tiwari there from our newsroom. Now, staying with the US, the Chinese owner of TikTok has said it will sue the US government owner over a new law which requires it to sell the video sharing platform or be banned in America. The company has called the legislation an extraordinary intrusion on free speech rights. From New York, Michelle Fleury has more.
TikTok is hugely popular in America. 170 million people use the platform to communicate. Lawmakers aren't so keen. Congress and the Biden administration believe the app and its Chinese owners ByteDance could be a danger to national security. The argument goes that Beijing could commandeer it to surveil and manipulate Americans. So they've given the company until the day before the next US president takes office on the 20th of January to sell or face a ban here in the United States. TikTok, well, it's fighting back, challenging the constitutionality of the new law, arguing in its legal filing, for the first time in history, Congress has enacted a law that subjects a single named speech platform to a permanent nationwide ban. The company also says that it's not possible legally, technically or commercially to divest within that timeframe. Part of the challenge is that with 1 billion users worldwide, a lot of its content is actually available across borders, making it all on harder to unpick. The US Justice Department declined to comment, but here's what White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had to say when asked about why President Biden continues to use TikTok for his political campaign.
So as it relates to the campaign and obviously other congressional members, they have to speak to themselves. The campaign has to speak to it. We've been very clear, what this law is not a ban, it is a divestment.
TikTok CEO Shou Chu, who appeared with his wife Vivian Cao at the Met Gala last night, is hoping TikTok's other recent First Amendment victories in the US, like blocking the state of Montana's bid to ban it, will help it prevail again. Outside of the courts, TikTok's best hope in a general election year is for Donald Trump to retake the White House, given that one of Mr. Trump's big backers and a major Republican donor, Jeff Yass, is also a TikTok investor.
TikTok will face challenges when proving its case in court. That's according to Kirk McGill, a lawyer at Hall & Still.
One of the primary difficulties that TikTok is going to have is that the principal First Amendment issue is the issue of its users' First Amendment rights as opposed to the company's First Amendment rights. And because the statute doesn't seek to ban TikTok, it seeks to require its divestment. That won't ultimately affect the end users, and they're the ones whose rights are most at issue.
And for when it comes to the US government, they need to prove in court that there are national security issues. Is that the case?
That's precisely right. The difficulty is the United States government has to balance showing its hand in court in order to beat TikTok, but revealing potentially its intelligence sources and methods abroad, which may have greater value. And that's always been the difficulty for the government when it comes to national security cases, is the balance between freedom and security and between disclosing its evidence and hiding and concealing that evidence in order to protect its intelligence activities.
So in essence, the two parties involved, TikTok and the US government, are almost arguing to prove two different things.
That's right. It is the classic clash between freedom and security that's existed arguably since the Magna Carta, and it's on show here again today with TikTok. The times and the technology may have changed, but the issues are quite the same.
The US has revoked some licenses that allow American companies to ship goods, like chips, to Huawei. Last month, the Chinese telecom giant launched its first AI-enabled laptop powered by an Intel processor. US officials see Huawei as a national security threat and have been trying to hobble its ability to develop the latest technology. Apple has unveiled a new artificial intelligence chip in its latest iPad Pro. This comes despite sales for the iPhone and the iPad falling. Ryan Reith from market intelligence firm IDC said the development was a significant one.
This was labeled as an iPad event, and it quickly turned into a chipset event. So, Apple announced some excellent iPads that are going to do great in our opinion. But I think the big storyline here is really the M4 chip announcement. So, this is, for those that don't know, this is really, sort of Apple's first silicon announcement that they've done that brings them into the sort of the step into AI. And there's a lot of things that are going to be following in the coming months, including their developer conference in about a month from now, that will play into a bigger picture around this. So the iPads are great. The discounting on the old iPads are excellent. The Air announcements, again, tremendous upgrades from the previous versions. The iPad Pros with the M4 leading with that, the brand new chipset, as opposed to the Mac. I think that's the biggest storyline, in my opinion.
Disney's streaming business has reported its first profit since its launch in 2019. The Disney Plus and Hulu streaming unit saw an operating profit of $47 million in the first 3 months of the year. But Disney's shares fell after it said the TV and park businesses face challenges in the months ahead. Now let's turn our attention to Finland, where one city is on an ambitious path to become carbon neutral. Lahti was once a centre of industry and polluted, but it has gone through something of a transformation, as Adrian Murray reports.
Warming up for another big game. It's not just goals that the Pelicans want to score. Lahti's ice hockey team is trying to go green. This arena uses renewable energy, and the team travelled to domestic matches on a biodiesel-fuelled bus.
We are going to zero, and we like to go below it, even to negative. The biggest thing why we start this project, we like to show the way how to do things better.
Their efforts have helped win sponsors and also influence the fans.
When we started counting, almost everybody came by their own car. Nowadays, they have changed their habits.
Lahti was once a polluted industrial city, but over the years, it's transformed itself and is forging a greener future.
Getting rid of coal was a major step. This plant supplies citywide electricity and heating, using wood chips and residual waste from forestry and households.
If we look back to early 2000, our total emissions were over 1 million tons of CO2 annually. 2020, that was reduced to close to 100,000 tons. So a huge reduction, over 1 million tons within 20 years.
Across the city, there's cleaner public transport, like electric buses, bike sharing, and lots of cycle paths. Reuse and recycling rates are also high, and a big part of the work is engaging the local community. Though take-up has been mixed, apps have also been tested out to encourage users to live more sustainably.
Everyone can choose suitable challenges for their life. For example, leaving a car for a day at home, or then you can choose, for example, 1 month not buying new clothes.
Heating, transport and food are among the biggest areas to tackle. However, some habits are hard to change, like steering drivers away from petrol cars. There's still plenty more to do, of course, but a greener future is one goal that lots of people can get behind. Adrian Murray, BBC News, Lahti.
Now, according to the official greenlahti.fi website, Finland plans to be carbon neutral by 2035, with Lahti becoming carbon neutral 10 years earlier by 2025. Now, before we go, shares of Reddit have jumped by around 15% in extended trading. Now, this came after it reported a surge in revenue in the first quarter, in its first ever disclosure as a public company. Reddit listed in the United States in March. Thanks for joining me here on Business Today. For today, I'll be back at the same times tomorrow, bringing you all the business news that matters to you. In the meantime, bye for now.
I'm not sure I've actually said this before. I came up there and I cried. Wow.
A symbol of friendship to some, panda diplomacy to others.
That world has eaten up and spit out a lot of young and attractive guys.
There's always more to the story with our podcasts. Listen on BBC Sounds.
For now, it's a defensive position and can only be activated if the militia attack.
They are proud of their democracy, but they also fear it's now under threat from China like never before.
Every time the government drops tear gas, people disperse, but the farmers come back.
When you're this close to the river, which is a front line, you are always watched, so you have to move quickly.
There when the story breaks. BBC News. Follow on the app.
Hello and welcome to Sports Day. I'm Jane Dougal. They were the underdogs, but Borussia Dortmund are through to the Champions League final after beating Paris Saint-Germain in their own backyard. And who will they meet? Could it be an all-German final? Bayern Munich play Real Madrid on Wednesday in the second leg of the other semi-final. Plus, we hear from an emotional Olympic marathon champion, Eliud Kipchoge, who says he feared for the safety of his family after trolls wrongly blamed him for the death of a rival. Hello and welcome to the programme. Well, despite the home side hitting the post 6 times across both legs of the semi-final, Paris Saint-Germain failed to score and they are out of the Champions League. So it is Borussia Dortmund who will play in the final at Wembley on the 1st of June after a breathtaking second leg in France. Dortmund went into the match 1-0 up and scored on the night in the French capital to win 2-0 on aggregate and reach their first Champions League final since 2013. Dortmund got the crucial goal when Mats Hummels was left unmarked 5 yards out. He headed in from a corner, prompting these celebrations. It was a desperately frustrating night for PSG, though, who hit the frame of Dortmund's goal 4 times on the night and twice in the first leg. They have never been European champions. They lost to Bayern Munich in the 2020 final. But Dortmund have won the trophy once before. They beat Juventus back in 1997. So, for PSG, it is heartbreak once again, as our reporter Conor McNamara explains.
Paris Saint-Germain threw the kitchen sink at this, and they will not believe that they have not scored. On 4 different occasions, they hit the woodwork, the post, the crossbar. Incredible. There was a penalty appeal laid on for Kylian Mbappe that didn't go his way. This huge investment in Mbappe in recent seasons has not produced the trophy that PSG wanted more than any other. But what about for Dortmund in their first Champions League semi-final for 11 years, having sold Haaland 2 years ago, having sold Jude Bellingham at the start of this season? They keep driving on, and they are into the final. 2-0 on aggregate. Dortmund eliminating Paris Saint-Germain.
So that means Dortmund will face either Bayern Munich or Real Madrid in the final at Wembley on June the 1st. Those 2 sides play their second leg in Spain on Wednesday, with the score 2-2 from last week's first match. Bayern have missed out on the Bundesliga title, and their star signing Harry Kane is still waiting to win a major trophy, despite scoring a remarkable 44 goals across all competitions this campaign. His manager says despite the lack of silverware, Kane has been the real deal this season.
I knew we get a big personality into our dressing room on top of everything what you can analyze. Goal scoring and movements and assisting and dealing with the pressure, you know it. But we knew we get a huge personality because he was captain of Tottenham and on top is still captain of the English national team. So Actually, he brought everything to the table that we could possibly hope for.
In England, Nottingham Forest's appeal against a 4-point deduction for breaking Premier League financial rules has been rejected. An independent commission had found Forest's losses in the 2022-23 season had breached the threshold of £61 million, and that decision has been upheld. It means Forest remains 17th in the league and 3 points clear of the relegation zone with 2 games of the season remaining. Our sports correspondent Katie Gornall's been following the story.
They were found to have overspent their profit and sustainability limit of £61 million by £34.5 million. Now, usually Premier League clubs are allowed to lose £105 million over a rolling 3-year period, but because Nottingham Forest spent 2 of those years in the Championship, their limit was reduced accordingly. Now, they could have been handed a 6-point penalty at the time, but the Premier League gave them a less severe punishment because they took into account their early plea and cooperation. Still, though, Forest were not happy with that punishment. They said at the time that the spending restrictions on promoted clubs, they said, undermined the league's integrity and competitiveness. Now, today we find out that their appeal has been dismissed, the 4-point penalty stands, and although they haven't commented, I think they and Everton, who we know have also been subject to points deductions this season under PSR, will be feeling probably hard done by because these rules have proved so controversial and they are set to be replaced by new regulations in the 25-26 season.
Katie Gornall there. Now to cycling, and favourite Tadej Pogačar has retained his overall lead after stage 4 of the Giro d'Italia. The Slovenian is 46 seconds clear of Britain's Geraint Thomas in the standings. It was a day to forget, though, for Eritrean Binyam Girmay, who was forced to abandon the race after crashing twice in quick succession on those slippery roads. The race leaders in the peloton caught a small breakaway group before the final 5 kilometres to set up the expected sprint finish, which was won by Italy's Jonathan Milan. Meanwhile, 2-time Tour de France winner Jonas Vingegaard says he's hoping to be back to defend his title when the race gets underway in June. Vingegaard is back riding on the road for the first time since a crash last month, which left him with a broken collarbone and several broken ribs. He says he is improving day by day. The Dane has won the last 2 editions of the Tour de France, which starts again from Florence at the end of next month.
This is the first time back on the bike for me, riding outside, and it's really
nice to finally be able to ride. Yeah, I still have some things to recover from, but it's going better and better. Of course, I hope to be there at the start of the Tour de France. We don't know exactly how my shape and how my recovery will go, but I will do everything I can to get there in my top shape.
Tennis now, and let's update you on the first round of the WTA tournament in Rome, where the former world number 2, Paula Badosa, has won her match in the opening round of the Italian Open. Badosa has slipped out of the top 120 because of injury and poor form, but she proved to be too strong for the Russian teenager Mira Andreeva, beating her in straight sets. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan's Yulia Putintseva booked her place in the second round with a straight sets victory over Italian home favourite Martina Trevisan. Putintseva didn't exactly endear herself to the crowd at the end, cupping her hand to her ear after she won match point, and she was loudly booed by the local support. Now, the two-time Olympic champion, Eliud Kipchoge, says he feared for the safety of his family during a campaign of online abuse that wrongly accused him of involvement in the death of fellow Kenyan marathon runner Kelvin Kiptum. The 24-year-old world record holder died in a car crash in February. He had been on course to challenge Kipchoge's dominance over the distance.
All people online, also social media platforms are saying that Eliud is involved actually in the death of this boy. So that was my worst news ever in my life. I received a lot of bad things that they will ban the camp, they will ban my investments in town, they will ban my house, they will ban the family.
Were you at any time in that period concerned about the safety of your children? Did you fear for your family?
Absolutely, yes. I started to call a lot of people to see whether people are safe. But my worst moment was I tried to call my mom, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I don't know. He told me that just take care, and a lot has been going on. She gave me courage.
An emotional Eliud Kipchoge there. Now, the former Wales winger Lewis Rhys-Zammit admits he's still got lots to learn before becoming the next star of the NFL. Rhys-Zammit went through the NFL's International Player Pathway programme and signed with the Kansas City Chiefs in March. He was also part of their rookie minicamp over the weekend.
Yeah, it was a good week, really good week. It was great to meet all the boys. Great to dive deep into the playbook. Obviously, we're only a few installs in. I've only been here for a week, but yes, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see what happens next. I've been put in the running back group to start with. I think there's going to be a versatile role for me. I'm hoping, the coaches are very creative here, so see what they can do. But it's all about me learning the playbook and learning the game, because without that, I can't do anything else. So, I'm fully focused on, the now. I've got to make the team. How am I going to do that? I've got to perform on the field. I've got to learn the playbook, and then we'll go from there. I'm just loving being able to work and work on all these crafts, because the more I can do, the more I can try and help this team.
Lewis Rhys-Zammit there. Now, before we go, a reminder of our top story. Borussia Dortmund have beaten Paris Saint-Germain 1-0 on the night in the French capital and 2-0 on aggregate to reach their first Champions League final since 2013. But the question is, who will they play? Will it be an all-German final on the 1st of June at Wembley? Because the other semi-final is played on Wednesday night. That's between Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. You can follow all of that on the BBC Sport website. Thanks for watching.
Hello.
The weather has been gradually drying up over the past 24 hours or so, and we've got some more dry, settled weather on the cards through much of the week ahead, really. High pressure is going to be in charge over the next few days, but for the rest of the week, we will at times see weather fronts just trying to topple across the north of that high pressure. Could bring a little bit of rain at times across parts of Scotland in particular, perhaps the north of Northern Ireland, but it'll be warming up here. Mostly dry elsewhere, though, with some spells of sunshine on the cards. So we are in for a relatively quiet few days of weather. We're likely to start Wednesday morning with quite a bit of mist and fog around, especially so for parts of eastern England, also perhaps Wales and the southwest of England. Could be some misty patches elsewhere. For most, they'll tend to lift and clear, so it'll brighten up. Some sunny spells, particularly for England and Wales. Just the odd isolated shower. More rain moving into the northwest of Scotland later on in the afternoon. So temperatures in the northwest under the cloud, only about 13 there for Stornoway, but up to around about 21 for the likes of Birmingham and London too. So there's that wet weather through Wednesday evening. Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland seeing some outbreaks of rain. Further south, most places staying dry, but there should be some mist and some fog that's going to be forming again into the early hours of Thursday morning. But certainly mild, many places staying in double figures overnight. So more of the same on Thursday. High pressure still in charge, so a lot of dry weather, mist clearing away gradually. Lots of sunshine, I think, for England and Wales by this stage. It just could be the odd isolated shower. Again, a little bit more cloud across the north of Scotland. Temperatures in Lerwick only around 11 degrees, but for the bulk of the UK, we're looking at around about 18 to 22 degrees. And that warming trend will continue as we head into Friday too. So high pressure still very much in charge. I think by Friday we'll have less in the way of rain and cloud across the north of Scotland and quite widely across the UK in those spells of sunshine. Temperatures will be above 20 degrees. We could see 23 or even 24 down towards the southeast. Again, a little bit cooler, especially across the north of Scotland and the Northern Isles in particular. Now, heading into the weekend, it looks like high pressure will be setting out towards the east there. This weather front will just try and nudge in from the west by the time we get to Sunday. But Saturday certainly looking dry, fine, pretty warm for all of us. Just that chance of a few showers moving into the west as we head through Sunday. Bye for now.
The climate of southern Europe is changing. It's becoming more and more like North Africa.
Thousands of people continue to stream across Sudan and South Sudan.
There's riot police everywhere around. This is not the face of France that Emmanuel Macron wants you to see.
We're having to stay under the trees here because Russian drones are constantly patrolling.
This was the town of Bethania. These were people's homes, but look at it now.
This is the moment they've been waiting for. The pride, the excitement and the affection is palpable.
This is as close as we can get to Gaza itself, about 5 kilometres in that direction. There is a lot of military activity, jets overhead.
17 days they have spent inside that tunnel. Now they are finally out.
Live from Washington, this is BBC News. Major splits between Israel and Hamas slow momentum for a possible ceasefire as aid groups describe a horrific humanitarian scene in Gaza. Adult film star Stormy Daniels testifies in Donald Trump's New York hush money trial. And Ukraine says it's foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Volodymyr Zelensky. Hello, I'm Catriona Perry. You're very welcome. The United Nations says Israel is not allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza through the Rafah crossing after Israeli forces took control of the Gaza side on the border with Egypt. Hamas has warned that the Israeli incursion in Rafah aims to undermine efforts to secure a ceasefire. On Monday night, Hamas announced it had accepted proposals drawn up by international mediators, but the deal was rejected by Israel as inadequate. Paul Adams reports from Jerusalem.
A deal may now be tantalisingly close, but in Rafah, Israel's military pressure is relentless. Today, severing Gaza's last link with the outside world, the crossing point into Egypt. And raising their flag, sending an unmistakable message to Hamas. The noose is tightening. The sounds of approaching war echo among the displaced. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in the sand against the Egyptian border or next to the sea. I don't know where to stay, Ahmed says. People are fleeing from Rafah, and I have my children with me. Gazans have been on the move since yesterday morning, heeding Israel's latest warnings, not knowing if the coming days will bring relief or despair.
After what we've witnessed, they've said multiple times that there will be a ceasefire, but we're frustrated and we have no hope. There's no big hope, only a small one.
For aid agencies already struggling to cope, the prospect of a full-scale Israeli operation in Rafah is alarming.
As the operation will progress, we will lose progressively more areas to the fighting. And I'm afraid that this will also affect our warehouses, health facilities, hospitals, and the very, very few sites where we have the ability to give medical support.
For the families of Israeli hostages, these are also moments of acute anxiety. John and Rachel's son Hirsch was abducted and badly injured on October the 7th. No sign of life until this Hamas video 2 weeks ago. His parents now just daring to hope.
When we heard the news that maybe there's a deal, we were cautiously optimistic. And we remain cautiously optimistic.
It's scary to have military actions going on. They're innocent civilians, including our son. We just need this to come to an end. And we need the mediators on all sides and the two main parties to just sit in the room and hammer this out and don't come out of the room without a deal.
Away from the quiet dignity of the hostage families, friends and supporters are determined to make as much noise as possible, demanding the government do more to rescue Hirsch and all the others.
These Israelis protesting in the heart of Jerusalem tonight feel that a deal to end this terrible war has never been closer. And so as they protest,